Hello everybody and welcome to another Unity devlog. In today's video I'll be going over some of the kind of quest handling and custom text parsing scripts that I've created for my Unity 3D platformer Brainine. These are mostly NPC interaction scripts in which a text file can be attached to a specific NPC and those interactions will play out, and there will be specific functions tied to kind of string identifiers in that text file that it'll read the lines of, and it will kind of activate these functions that will affect the quests in some way. For a specific example, I have a file here called quest test start, specifically for this quest that I am testing. That's why it's called quest test start. If we look in here line by line, we have these identifiers: camera, speech, event, and end. And quest is the most important one because I'm going to be going over that right now. This QUE string identifier identifies a quest, and then the the function I have is going to parse this information and figure out each of these identifiers, and then noticing the identifiers that follow it, enact a specific function on that quest. So if I look at the NPC, this is specifically the one that the character is going to interact with. It has a quest attached to it. This quest has an array of objectives attached to it, and so we can add multiple quests to this character, and each of those quests is going to hold these objectives. There is a start, active, and end kind of text field thing that is taking these text documents that I can generate in the actual inspector here with this text document generator that I created with a custom inspector. And so we can go to that NPC. We could see this quest. If I start the game, you can see that the quest status, this quest status is set to inactive. It can end up being inactive, active, priority active, ready to complete, or complete. Inactive means, of course, the quest is not active. It can't be interacted with outside of activating the quest. Active means that the specific quest objects tied to that quest are instantiated, and all the logic and scripts attached to that quest are running when it is active. Priority active means the same thing, but it's specifically like, say, a main quest kind of thing where this is the only quest that you can interact with at the time. There's currently no logic in place to make that functionality happen, but that's going to happen in the future. So if it's a priority active quest, that means you will not be able to activate or kind of interact with any other quests in the area while that is happening. Ready to complete means the objectives associated with the quest are set to complete, and complete means we have went back to the NPC after it was set to ready to complete and we've completed the quest. We can look at the quest, and it has this list of objectives. The objectives are stored right here on an empty object. And we can look at that. This objective's name is jump on platforms. The objective ID is 0. This objective is mandatory. It's not yet complete. These values are currently inconsequential. Specifically for this quest, because this objective, because the requirement type is singular, we could change it to iterative, and it would require multiple, acquisitions of a specific item, or killing specific amounts of enemies to finish the objective. So the current value is how many of those items you've collected, and the requirement value would be how many of those you need to have the complete bool set to true. So if we look at in the game, we have the quest is set to inactive, and I can travel up to the character and then go over here, and if I press T, it'll say hello, and we can actually see exactly where all this information is coming. I have this quest test start. When I press that, the camera changes to camera 1, and that's exactly what this identifier does, CAM for camera, and the first camera. And then since it contains a speech identifier, it is going to read any text after the bracket in that line. So if I press T again to go to the next line, what should happen is event 0 should play, which will spawn in the quest objects, which will be kind of a stairway of platforms. Camera will switch to camera 2, and this speech will play, go jump on those platforms, idiot. So if I go into the game and I press T, exactly that happens. Now if I look there again, if we go to the next line when I press T, it'll have speech. Speech will say thank you. It'll switch back to camera 1. So we'll go in there and press T. And exactly that happens. Now on the next line, which I just accidentally went to without explaining it first, quest 0 A. So A is activating it. A is the identifier for what happens to the quest, and 0 is the quest that it happens to. And then that interaction is going to end. That is what that string identifier of end does. Now I have a second set of text here. If I go here, it says quest test active. If the test or the quest is currently active and I try and interact again, it'll play through a different set of commands. So switch camera, say speech, what are you doing? Speech, I already gave you a request, speech, get to it, and then end that interaction. And I can test that out right here. What are you doing? I already gave you a request, get to it. Okay, and nothing has been affected in the quest because there's no quest identifier in that text field. So nothing's really changed. It's just a nice little bit of fluff to tell you that you've already accepted the quest. But now if I go to the NPC and I look at the quest object, you can say that the quest status is now set to active and setup has occurred. Setup means that the quest objects have become active and spawned in. So now if I look over to the objective again, we have the objective complete status is not complete, and we can go in here and then we can complete the objective. I will jump on here, and then the objective is complete. And that is complete here because I have a trigger object set there, if I focus in on it. So the trigger event trigger object script will handle either a Unity event, which is set right here using the Unity event system, a quest status event, which will take this a quest ID and it will set the status of it using any of these identifiers. The identifiers are as follows: I for inactive, A for active, P for priority active, R for ready to complete, and C for complete. So you put the quest ID here and the quest status using that character, or you can change the objective status. In this particular instance, this trigger has changed the objective status. So on the objective, the status was set to complete. So I will continue over here, and we are going to the character here. But before I interact with them, I will look at the quest again. The quest status has been set to ready to complete. And there's a kind of little bit of code that is in a function that returns a bool. And pretty much in that function, if I go on here, check objectives. Okay, so I could go down to that. The check objectives function has a bool that is set to true. It says is complete. And if it goes through all the objectives and it detects that a single objective's complete status is not set to true and that objective is mandatory, then the complete status is going to be set to false and it's going to return that. So if I want to check if the quest can currently be completed by checking the objectives, I'll run this function. So that has occurred and the quest status is set to ready to complete. So I can go up to the character here and I'll look at the quest status end or quest test end. It'll switch to camera 1, speech will happen. The next line will retain that camera 1, another speech will happen, and then the third line, the quest 0 will be set to complete and the interaction will end. So if I press T, nice jumping, you're natural. The quest should now set to be complete. This quest status complete. Okay, so that has set up the quest, and it hasn't been implemented yet, but on the NPC, on the NPC controller, there is a current available quest section. We have that quest that's there. But if I had another quest on this character, the index would just iterate upon itself. So we'll add 1 to it. And the very next quest attached to this character will be the next available quest. So if that was set up and I go over to the character and I press T again, it will switch to that next quest and use that different text file to interpret the data. So that will be set up in the future, but pretty much all the logic that handles that is already set up. Now if I go into the script here, I have a few things to explain, and I have a diagram I set up color-coded for your convenience, and I'll switch to that now. So if we look at the diagram that I have set up, essentially what's happening is we're taking the text file, we're looking for the identifiers, and then the specific identifiers that precede these. So we have the text file here, camera 1, speech, nice jumping, blah, blah, blah. We find the identifier of quest, there it is. And then there is the quest activation index, and you can see it right here. I have it color-coded at the index of Q plus 4, including 1. So if we go to Q and then the 4th index, we identify it there. That is the quest activation index. So we're finding the quest, we're going through the array of quests, and then we are finding out what's happening to it right here with number 4, with the purple identifier. So quest status identifier. At the index of 5, we have the quest status identifier. A is set up there, so it's activated. That's what the A means on there. And we have in a different set of circumstances where this second object that's in the string index preceding the quest activation index, if it's not just a letter identifier or character, if it is this point here, that will indicate that we are going to identify an objective within the quest instead of the quest itself. So if the script finds this kind of decimal point here, it'll know that we're looking for an objective, and what is immediately after that is the objective index. So in this particular instance here, we would do quest 2, objective 1. And if there is a plus at the end of it, we will iterate upon the requirements for that objective. If not, we will just set it to complete. Or if desired in the future, a second identifier like the active right here, I can decide what's going to happen to that objective. But for now, all we need to do is set it to complete. So this logic can also be these functions are available in the scripts themselves as just public functions. So I don't need to handle them within a text file. If I wanted to set up a trigger that would activate these like I did earlier with the objective, it works the same way. So if it's 2.1, then we just go to quest 2 objective 1 and we set it to complete. If it's 2.1 plus, then we're going there and we're iterating on the requirement value. So if you needed to find 5 objects and you haven't found any yet, and the plus is attached to that, and acquiring that object activates the function that handles the logic that iterates on that value. So then you'll have 1 out of 5 objects required to complete that objective. So if we go in line by line, if the current line, which is going through all the lines on this text document, so line 1, line 2, line 3, I actually moved it down 1 line just so it was easier to read at that particular time that I took the screenshot. Normally I wouldn't do that. So this should be line 1, 2, and 3. So it's going through those lines, and it's finding the quest activation index that we pointed out. It's converting that to an integer, because originally any kind of line that is found in the text document is automatically a string, and the substrings, and then so on forth with the characters. Is finding the substring index of Q on there, and then we're finding that index at the end of that. So if it's followed by the period, then we're going to get the objective index. The objective index is initially set to -1, and that's used later because the script will say, well, if it's set to -1, then we just won't use it at all. If it's overwritten by what the text document indicates, then we will use it. And then we have the identifiers down here with the plus. If it sees the plus, then we're going to iterate on it. If not, we're going to set it to true. And we have the set quest objective status right here. And as you can see on the top right, it has a lot of, or it has multiple overloads where if it ends in a bool, it will just change the status. If it ends in a character, then we will do that incrementation. And in the future, I could set it to, input a specific incrementation based on, a third identifier or something like that, but that isn't really necessary. And that's pretty much how it works. Hopefully that is intuitive enough by yourself that you don't need this kind of explanation, but hopefully the explanation also helps. So we have the text file here. We have the NPC controller that interprets the text file. So it grabs those lines and it goes in one by one. Looks for the trigger of the camera, trigger event, trigger animation, trigger speak, trigger quest, and then it performs further logic depending on those, functions. The quest manager is what it's accessing within those kind of logical operators. We go to quest manager, set quest status, set objective status. All those things are handled in the quest manager. You could see this switch case looking for those characters and then performing specific logic depending on which character is in there. The event trigger object is also using a switch case. So the event type dictates whether or not it's going to use either the Unity event or it's going to use one of those quest manager functions. And the quest objective is what we saw earlier. You can set whether or not the objective is mandatory or if it's like an extra objective that you don't need to complete, but a bonus one. And it tells us if the objective is complete or not. So if the current value is equal to the requirement value, or if it's over the requirement value, it's set to the requirement value. So you can't obtain more items than it requires for the quest. You can, but it won't really affect that value more than it should. And if that current value is equal to the requirement value, and the requirement type is iterative, then complete equals true. So the objective is complete. So there's further logic in here so that if we are just using the logic of the functions tied to a specific object, like when I pick up an object and it iterates on that value, I don't need to have another function that's going to set the quest status to complete. The objective status to complete, that is going to occur by itself when it finds out that the values are equal to each other. And the quest object contains those kind of text files, and I can actually change the status of the quest in here with other public functions. There's a lot of public variables in here. I understand the best practices and stuff with serialized private variables and stuff like that, but right now I am kind of fleshing this stuff out and making it work. I understand that's a very common thing for game developers to say, well, we'll go in and we'll fix it later when we get it to work. But in this particular instance, I do know what I'm doing, and it's not going to be a big issue changing this stuff later. But I hope that was informative and interesting. In my next video, I will be going over, those custom inspector elements that I was describing earlier. But right now, I just wanted to show you my custom, text parsing method. And I think it's pretty interesting, and it was informative, and, not informative, but it was a learning experience, and it was really fun to make. So I hope to work on more stuff like that in the future. Hopefully you learned something from this, or you just thought it was interesting. If you did, then please subscribe to the channel or follow me on my Twitter account, which is also lowresdev. I post a lot of stuff there. Sometimes I post individual GIFs of my work. and you can see the further development of this 3D platformer and my FPS project that I'm working on there. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I think I said that a few times, but sometimes I'm a little self-conscious as to whether or not the information in the video is redundant or superfluous or, anything like that. But I think this one is pretty concise. Maybe running a little long, but I think all the information that was in there was useful, and that's it. Thank you.